So let's see if anyone remembers where we are in the Dakpo Rinpoche's great collection of teachings to the assembly. Page 85. I think we're past there. We have started on faith. No, we did not do this one. I think we're somewhere in that section, in that chapter that is talking about the importance of faith. What we are translating here as faith can also be translated into conviction. How to develop conviction, the importance of conviction. This is in slightly different from another word that is translated often as devotion, which in Tibetan is called mogu. Whereas here the word in Tibetan is depa. So depa has more to do with gaining conviction. Although mogu and depa are used sometimes, often interchangeably, here for Gampopa, when he talks about depa, it is distinguished from when he talks about mogu as the singular quality of heart that has to be present for genuine Mahamudra to be experienced. Especially when that Mahamudra state is being introduced to you, being pointed out to you by the guru, by a guide. There then it is said that the single most important quality is mogu. So their mogu is not what we're talking about here in terms of conviction. So here, if you look at page 5 or maybe 4, depending on which version you have, regarding the actual basis of depa, of conviction, of faith, there are 7 aspects. The causes of arising faith, the measure of arisen faith, the divisions, the essence, the analogy, and the functions, and the measure of stable faith. These are 7. So I think we have looked at least the 4 causes of the arising of faith. The first one is to study, to read. But here he makes the point that when you're reading, when you're studying, you should do it in the context of first making offerings and supplications, then read those teachings. So here he's marking off this kind of reading as something that is supported by, you could say, religiosity of some sort, and not just like picking up a book, a novel, or picking up a technical book to master the book, but that this is to be done within the context of a of a spiritual activity. And then associating with friends who have conviction, then conviction can arise. And then he uses the analogy, if you are associated, if you come in contact with indigo dye, then you become blue. If you come into contact with red dye, you become red. So friends with conviction, conviction in the truth of the Dharma are important. Then relying on guides, spiritual guide. And so here then he says, a truly spiritual guide who is virtuous, truly virtuous, is one who knows how to practice and does not contradict the Dharma in his or her actions. When you associate with such a guide, then conviction in the Dharma can also arise. As I've said, sometimes teachers are humble when they say, pay attention to what I teach you and follow what I teach you, but don't model yourselves necessarily after how I act. This kind of statement is reasonable to a degree, but it's also important, I think. Guides don't kind of excuse themselves by saying this too much, and think that as long as I can mouth the teachings very well to convince the students to practice, how I actually conduct myself is of secondary importance. Sometimes it seems to, say that. Again, like I said, teachers are humble, and teachers also very skillfully sometimes don't want you to hang your practice on their conduct. But nonetheless, I think if their conduct don't match their words, it's hard to take their words seriously. Having said that now, it's also true to say, at the end of the day, however, whether you are going to practice the Dharma or not, it cannot be, it should not be what other people are doing or not doing. As long as it's dependent on what other people are doing or not doing, then your Dharma practice is not yet stable. So Ajahn Sumedho, the main successor to Ajahn Chah, tells of how years back, many years back when Ajahn Chah was still alive, Ajahn Chah would ask Ajahn Sumedho to reflect on how his practice would be affected if he woke up one day in the monastery and discovered that all his fellow disciples, senior students of Ajahn Chah, has eloped with the nuns, and the Dalai Lama has decided to marry an American woman. Apparently there were some rumors like that way back, that he was considering marrying an American woman. This was like in the maybe 70s. And so Ajahn Sumedho said that was very powerful teaching for him. In a way, you could say that it's a form of Guru Yoga, the way that Gampopa would advocate Guru Yoga and Mogu, the other word, devotion, being at the heart of Guru Yoga. In a way, it's a form of Guru Yoga, which is, trusting by relying on the outer Guru, gaining more and more inspiration and trust. So, inspiration and trust, and therefore openness of heart to relying on the inner Guru, by relying on the outer Guru to help us discover the inner Guru. Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's still, your Dharma practice needs to be your own. You need to rely on yourself for that. Anyway, moving on. Finally, by meditating on impermanence and death, conviction can arise. So all the other three sources of giving rise to conviction in the Dharma, perhaps they all kind of need to be finally led to this point, which is the immediate kind of point of knowing and remembering impermanence and death. It is uncertain when we will die. Life is short. Death comes quickly. Recognizing, understanding impermanence, and with certain conviction in it, certain conviction, certainty, with certainty and conviction in the truth and the fact of impermanence and death, then clear conviction in the Dharma can arise. Second, the measure of generating faith is found in understanding impermanence and death. And so, the more we recognize the truth of impermanence and death, and the more, as a result of recognizing impermanence and death, the reversing of the heart's clinging to this world. So we know that conviction is actually now gaining traction, so to say, when the heart's clinging to this world is beginning to turn around. The heart is beginning to turn away from clinging to this world. Again, this world is not describing this world as a place. In fact, this world is not talking about planet Earth, and planet Earth and all the wonderful things or all the problems. It's talking about the world as experienced by you, which is afflicted by the three poisons. This entanglement, this messiness. When your heart begins to cling less to this messiness, cling less to all these stories that we tell about ourselves, stories that we tell about others. Most of the time, all these stories don't really have any basis, except for our stubbornly holding on to them. And of course, as long as you stubbornly hold on to them, they become true, or true enough. This is not to say that you pretend that it is not so. That's also not the case. If you have a particular story that keeps running in your head about you, about someone else, about your situation, about someone else's situation, what is being said here is not that you suddenly go, oh, well, it's all not true. But using the Dharma, you illuminate those stories. Those are the worlds that he's asking us to be ready to reverse our heart, to turn our hearts away from those narratives, those stories, those things that prop alive a certain essence to who you think you are. All the places and all the ways that you get stuck in, by not recognizing that these are stories that we tell. These are stories that we tell that then come back and act on solidifying the stories, which then further solidifies this identity, and so on and so forth. Anything less than we are Buddhas are stories to reverse your heart from. Reversing the heart from these worlds isn't pretending that they are not there. Isn't like the proverbial ostrich sticking its head in the sand and thinking, oh, well, problems are gone now because I can't see them. That's not what we're talking about here either. But we are talking about, will you work on not letting these stories become you? Because it's not you. As we say, you are Buddha. No amount of practice is going to get you to fully recognize you are Buddha if you're not willing to recognize that you are Buddha and instead cling on to the stories, to the narratives, to the identities, to the masks that we have put on, layer after layer after layer after layer, until, as in the Zen tradition says, where is your true face? Where is your true identity? Even before your parents were born. Your parents. How far back can we go realistically? Before your parents were born, proverbially. Before your parents were born. Much less your story about who you are, what you are. How mighty, how great you are. How terrible, how unloved you are. All these stories. What is your original face before your parents were born? What is the original face before attachment and aversion got together and gave rise to this sentient being with all its confusions, with all its identities, with all its lifetimes, with all its stories, narratives, clingings. And so here, we know conviction is growing when we recognize that every moment our lives are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. We don't have all the time in the world to wake up. Now is the time. Now is the time. Then having firm conviction in karmic cause and effect leads to caution regarding virtue and non-virtue. Then it's not all just abstract. When your heart's clinging to this world is beginning to reverse its course, to turn around to see truly who you are, it needs to be accompanied by having conviction in how happiness turns up, how suffering turns up. Why are things going, quote unquote, well for you? Cause and effect. Why are things going not well for you? Cause and effect. Yes, others provide conditions, but that's the best they can do, either good or bad. if you are not creating those causes, there is no suffering to be experienced. If you're not creating the causes, there's no happiness to be experienced. And if you recognize that, then you watch your actions of body, speech, and mind. As I've said again and again, speech for most of us is the greatest cause of suffering. Actions, most of us are living at a time and a place where the three major non-virtuous actions we engage in on rare occasions, right? Quite rare. Speech, that's a different story. And especially speech is the major drama producing force when two people are together. Speech. What thoughts can create, of course, ultimately, that's where suffering comes and where suffering takes place and where suffering disappears. Of course, it's in thoughts. But right now, too subtle for you to notice. Too subtle for you to really pay attention to. So the four types of speech is the main creator of suffering. I mean, all of the internet these days, it's that. That's speech. All of social media is that, speech. If you don't believe that that's the main cause of suffering these days, speech, well, look again. Examine. So watch speech. And then having firm conviction in karmic cause and effect leads to caution regarding virtue and non-virtue. And it leads to also diligence in accumulation and purification. And to accumulate both merit and understanding. And they go hand in hand. Merit and wisdom. Or merit and understanding. Merit is the source of happiness. Merit is not food itself, it's the ability to enjoy food. Merit isn't friends itself, but the ability to enjoy friends. Merit isn't wealth itself, but the ability to enjoy wealth. What makes it possible for us to enjoy the things we enjoy is based on merit. Lacking merit, you may be surrounded by everything that everyone else covets, but you are miserable. And that's also sometimes more colloquially, people will say, you're not grateful for what you have. Yeah? Sometimes that's the common way of saying it. But if we actually understand cause and effect, karmic causality, the principle of merit, then we know, it's not that the things, the conditions of happiness are not there, but I don't have the merit. Diligence in accumulation, accumulating merit, accumulating understanding and purification, meaning removal of the afflictive emotions, of the mental defilements. Mental defilements are the enemies of both short-term happiness and lasting happiness. Mental defilements. if we don't take responsibility for our own mental defilements, then there's no end. Again, there's no end to dissatisfaction. If it has always turned outwards, this condition is not there, that condition is not there, or even worse, someone else is taking away those conditions. All of that may be true, but again, where is the cause? The cause lies with ourselves. Happiness and suffering both are inside jobs. And the thought that there is nothing to do or think about other than Dharma. This point needs to be genuine and heartfelt. Not because, I want to be a good Buddhist. I want to be a Super Sangha member. So I'm going to force myself to think of nothing except for Dharma. That's a fake, kind of trying to keep up with appearances. Keep up with the Joneses. That's not going to work. It's saying when you genuinely move more and more, then right now you're like, well, what about, so most of the time it's like, you may be inspired to practice the Dharma when in fact you don't really want to go get a job and pay bills. That could be mistaken as, I'm only thinking of Dharma now. Then Dharma becomes just an excuse. Not to want to go to work, not to want to, do laundry. You're like, I'm only thinking of Dharma now. That's not, that's not a measure. That's just, practicing Dharma is easier. Also, that's not going to work. Third of the seven, there are three divisions of faith: vivid or clear faith, confident faith, and eager or aspirational faith. First, clear faith arises when one sees the face of a true guru or spiritual guide, hears their voice, or when one goes to a special sacred place and one's hair stands on end or tears flow. I'm pretty sure we have covered this actually. Second, confident faith is practicing the teachings of the perfectly awakened Buddha, whether extensive or concise, without any doubt. Third, eager, aspirational faith is to aspire that any Dharma, great or small, that one practices will quickly clear obscurations, and that one will definitely attain the good qualities and happiness of the higher realms and liberation. These three types of faith, vivid, confident, and eager or aspirational, is explained slightly differently in other sources. But no contradiction. These are sometimes you find specific kind of categories having been established in previous generation, then every generation kind of interprets it a little differently. Fourth, the essence of faith is a faith that is not mixed with disbelief. The essence here means like, what is like the pure, when it's pure, when it's on the essential level, then it is not mixed with disbelief. It is not the kind of faith that is merely warm on the surface but frozen underneath. It must not be the kind of faith that is flour merely on the surface, hiding ash below. This is referring to some unscrupulous ways of doing business in Gampopa's time. So main point here is, it cannot be. And don't let it be because you want to keep up with others, because you want to appear to have faith. That's not enough. A faith that is not mixed with disbelief, I would say just be careful here. And again, don't out of because I want to belong to the club, I look like I don't have disbelief mixed with conviction. Meaning you have to work through these disbeliefs. Work with them genuinely. If they are present, acknowledge their presence. Not like pretend. Not encouraging blind faith. Not encouraging herd mentality. But that you want to work on understanding. Conviction here is conviction based on understanding. Growing. And so this is really about growing understanding. Understanding that increases and strengthens conviction. You need this kind of conviction. Even though understanding at first is intellectual. We're not even talking about like wisdom. We are talking about intellectual understanding that can give rise to conviction. Conviction has the power to protect you or keep you firm when things don't go well in life. Whereas intellectual understanding, usually, if you just have that and it has not yet led to conviction, intellectual understanding is pretty powerless when things don't go right in your life. When things don't line up the way you expect them to line up. If you only have intellectual understanding, then your particular set of understanding is failing now. Then what do? You go look for another set of intellectual understanding. Tomorrow I'm Jehovah's Witness. You know? Because if it is just based on intellectual understanding. So the intellectual understanding needs to lead to conviction, which is here translated as faith. The essence of faith is faith to practice only the Dharma, virtuous Dharma. Fifth, the analogy for faith is a water purifying jewel that when placed in muddy water purifies it, clears muddy water. So it's like a filter. So apparently there were these apparently there were these jewels that you place in the water. It clears water. Today we call it a water filter. You know, muddy water, right, is the source of death for many people in the old times and even today. Not having clean water kills people. So here using this water purifying jewel is a powerful thing to have. So it means like a water filter, it filters out that which is not water. Similarly, conviction is like that water filter that makes the mind clear and separates from the pure from the impure, meaning what is from what it is not, from what that is not. So conviction can do that. Sixth, the function of faith is to diminish non-virtuous actions like a waning moon, meaning increasingly and inevitably, like a waning moon, and to increase virtuous actions like a waxing moon, increasingly and inevitably. Seventh, the measure of stable faith is, we know our conviction has reached a stable point when one does not transgress the true Dharma out of desire, hatred, fear, or ignorance. At that point you can be said as a person of faith, as a person having conviction. It is necessary that one does not transgress Dharma due to desire, due to fear, due to ignorance. If one possesses these qualities, one has faith. So this is the chapter on faith or conviction. What should be the reading order again after this?
What page was that one? Works of faith.
Yeah.
Next one is page 56. Necessary qualities of the secret.
Necessary qualities of a spiritual guide for the path of secret mantra. Yeah.
Reshare this.
So this one is to, right? This is the teaching of Gampopa, spelling out the qualities that are necessary for one who is serving as a guide for us, especially when we are practicing Vajrayana. The old texts tend to use secret mantra instead of Vajrayana. Not that the word Vajrayana isn't used, but it's not used so commonly in the old texts. As taught by the precious Guru, when a person having developed the common paths in their being desires to enter the uncommon path of secret mantra, meaning when you have gained a basic understanding and you're cultivating bodhicitta via focused on the 6 teachings on the 6 perfections, the trainings that Shantideva lays out very clearly, for example, in the bodhisattva's conduct, entering into the bodhisattva's conduct, or the way of the bodhisattva in the bodhicayavatara. So those are called the common paths. So when you have developed the common paths in your heart, and now desire to enter the uncommon path of secret mantra, so the specialized, it is important to rely on a qualified great vehicle spiritual guide. Great vehicle means, the spiritual guide need to have bodhicitta. Regarding the qualities of such a guide, they must have a lineage tied to the lineage. And so they need to come from a tradition that is tied to a lineage. Then that lineage is tied to, meaning has, living sounds. So, meaning it's alive today. Those sounds are tied to oral scriptural transmission. So meaning those instructions are based on, tied to oral scriptural transmission, and that transmission finally is tied to blessings. Blessings means it's a transmission based on realizations. So, as for lineage tied to the lineage, so each of this he's going to expand on. From the perfectly complete Buddha, there must be an unbroken lineage of accomplished masters, one that has not generated into broken vows or corrupt teachings. A lineage tied to sounds refer to how the Kagyu lineage is transmitted from mouth to mouth, ear to ear, and heart to heart. It must be one that has not degenerated into black letters and rotten texts. So especially in this early period of the Kagyu. Kagyu here, yeah? I think at this point, when this text was composed, there was probably a sense already that Gampopa is transmitting something distinctive that would be called Kagyu, but it's not as strong as what we think of as Kagyu today, meaning in this kind of very distinctive, specific lineage. Remembering that during that time, Kagyu simply means the Gyupa, the lineage that comes from the Ka, meaning the authoritative teachings of the Buddha, meaning authentic teachings, the powerful words of the Buddha. So it's emphasizing here, the true teachings of the Buddha is transmitted from mouth to mouth, ear to ear, heart to heart, and not degenerated into black letters and rotten texts. So these early Kagyupas didn't really care for too many books. Later Kagyupas got into the business of writing books and refuting books and so on and so forth. As for sounds tied to oral scriptural authority, the Guru must definitely realize the meaning of what is being said, and they must definitely understand it in their hearts. Finally, the connection of scriptural authority to blessings refer to the necessity of an unbroken lineage with the blessings to generate qualities in the minds of others. Specifically, what blessings? The power to generate qualities in the minds of others. Therefore, seek a guru who possesses all these qualities. The blessings to generate qualities in the minds of others. It's not like, it's something that can be given from this person to the next person. But it is talking about, right, someone who lives the teachings and therefore has the power to inspire these qualities, to generate these qualities in others. Now, again, back to that point, if you don't walk the talk, no matter how eloquent your talk, no matter how your talk might seemingly inspire others to walk the walk, the power is still limited. Yeah, it's lacking blessings in that sense. So that's one kind of set of qualities. In the next section, he will talk about alternatively. You can also think of it as someone having the following qualities. So he goes into an alternative. And then the third part, he gives you yet another way of talking about what are the qualities necessary for such guides. But today we're going to stop here with the teachings from this collection.